join us for another episode where real men have real conversations about leadership, relationships, morality, and dominion. Welcome to Mancode.
Well, hello, Mancode and YouTube viewing audience. I'd like to welcome you back to another Mancode conversation. If you haven't been with us last time out, we talked about having opposite friends of the sexy relationship. We had a lot of fun with that conversation. So I want y'all to go back and watch that. And while you're watching it, go back and like it, because you will get some laughs, but you'll also get some nice insight. And while you're doing that, share it, because somebody else will want to hear this too. You'll actually look smart sharing something good. And then subscribe, because the Mancode is always throwing something out there hot. So just to welcome everybody back, we have a special guest tonight. I'd like to welcome Shauna Smith. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. I should have did that. Thank you for joining us on the Mancode. Go ahead and give us just a mild little brief intro about yourself and we get rolling.
I come to you from Kalamazoo, Michigan, by way of the megatropolis of Bangor, Michigan. I am at the excuse me, sir, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I'm a country girl. I was country before country was cool. So grew up in a very, very small rural farm town about 30 miles west of Kalamazoo, and I moved 30 whole minutes to get away from my father because I was a daddy's girl. I couldn't be that far away from him. So I was like, okay, that's far enough. Let's see. I graduated from Cornerstone University with a master's in business. My background is in education and youth development, quite recently, early childhood. And I am an advocate for Black and Brown love and Black and Brown marriage. And I am an advocate for the empowerment of Black women and Black men. I used to do a blurb on Facebook called Build Men Mondays, and it was really devoted to the uplifting of Black men. I was the only girl in my house growing up. And what I learned was that it was something that Black men of my generation still don't share very often, is that men have very, very deep emotions, just like women do. And my room was the safe spot for, my cousin and older brother to be like, your daddy getting on my nerves. I can't take it no more. This was the shoulder to cry on, and as I could, hold their confidence and give them a place to just be themselves, with no judgment. So that's a little bit about me.
So you very used to men, so you're gonna blend in tonight. So that's what's up. All right. So we've been kind of really hitting on relationships last few conversations. We've been tipping over a lot of rocks, but we're gonna talk about marriage in a different aspect tonight, and really in the sense of, is marrying Black a problem, or is Black marriage a problem? Because why is there a lack of? So we're gonna kind of dive that around. But as y'all know, I like to bring stats to the table. So I got a few stats I'm gonna read off, and we're just gonna kind of break it down from there and see what y'all think. Now stats change because stats are based on facts. Facts are always subject to change. So hey, these numbers could be different even tomorrow. But only about half of US adults, 51%, are currently married. The share is highest among Asians at 61%, lowest among African Americans on a whole at 31%, with whites 55%, Hispanics 48%. Now this is another study done between 2008 2010. You don't get new data right away, so we'll make up some more numbers later on. But according to this, now this is why I brought this up, because a lot of times people think that the lack of Black marriage is because we're marrying outside of our race. That ain't true. So when you look at it, only 15.5% of Black men marry interracially. 17.1%, no, actually 9.7% Black women. So that really doesn't throw it out there. Where I'm trying to go with this is, why is there such a lack of marriage amongst Black people? Now, I'm gonna give you this one. It's called the Wilson hypothesis versus just different tastes. Okay, another explanation. The most common explanation of the racial marriage gap is the so-called Wilson hypothesis. It suggests that the formation of Black families is affected by the fact that there are more Black women than men, and that Black men suffer from higher rates of unemployment and incarceration. Okay. Another point on that, it could be that the gap is the consequence of preferences. Maybe white women have a stronger taste for marriage than Black women, which could, in an instance, be a consequence of social norms. Have to think on that one for a sec. But I don't think that's true either. All right. So, hearing all this, okay, let's chop this up. In our opinion, which we have a lot of, is there a stigma among Blacks about marriage? Because on paper, it seems we have an aversion to it. I'm gonna let you go. I like to let our special guest tonight answer this first. Tell me what you think.
Is
Everything
there,
on the table.
so the question is, if I understand correctly, do Black people have an aversion to marriage or see it as a stigma?
Yes.
Okay. I think that, it's a complicated question, right? I guess the easy answer or the short answer would be no. I don't think we have an issue with marriage in general. I think we like the idea of marriage. I think some of the statistics and the hypotheses that you suggested do factor into that greatly, because I know people. I had a cousin who was incarcerated for 20 years. So, when you're incarcerated from age 20 to, age 40, you don't have the opportunity at that point to get married, right? You can get married after that, but in those typical marriage years, those men are not available in the Black community. I can recall after I moved to Kalamazoo for college, and I remember being in school and a young man, there was a friend of mine, really smart young man, but had a really rough upbringing, sold drugs to support himself. But he graduated Kalamazoo Valley Community College magna cum laude. And 2 weeks after his graduation, he was arrested for possession of, I don't remember what the drugs were, and went to prison for 20 years. And I remember in Kalamazoo during the late 80s, during the Reagan's war on drugs, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was really a war on Black people, Black men in particular. But when you affect the Black man, you inadvertently affect the Black woman, even. So I remember in mass, Black men being rounded up in Kalamazoo County on minor drug possessions and gone 20 years or more. And some of those men you haven't seen again. And I don't know if it's just that they didn't return to Kalamazoo County or they got more years tacked on or what happened, but some of those families were broken 20 plus years ago and never recovered. So I would say, no, we don't have an aversion. I think Black marriages have been fought based on slavery, right? Black marriages have been fought based on the fact that there's teamwork in marriage. There's wealth in marriage. There's inheritance in marriage. If we recall our history, Black people had to fight for the right to just be married in an enslaved environment, right? And so I think all of those things have factored into our low numbers. I know in the 60s and 70s, if a woman had children and she wasn't working, she was not allowed to have a man in the house and receive government subsidies. So the man was kicked out, and this was most profound in the Black community. You had a lot of Black men who were not only interested in marriage, but very much invested in their families. But due to economic issues, I know several couples who are very devoted to each other right now, who choose to live together as opposed to, jumping the broom and getting married because for economic reasons. So I'm going to say, I guess the short answer is no, with a lot of caveats.
All right, who else want to tackle that one?
All right, it was good being on here. I'll see y'all later. I guess my response to this answer is more so generationally, and I don't have any like stats or data to prove it. I'm just kind of going off like my lived experience. I feel like with my generation, marriage in its traditional form is not a value. And I feel like people have an aversion to it. I think because we have reduced marriage to just a piece of paper, or why do I need to let the government know what I'm doing? And a lot of us have fallen outside of the Christian faith. And so this concept of like covenant, we don't have. And so like for me and my wife, right, it's deeper than just a piece of paper. For my brother and his wife, it's deeper than a piece of paper, because we have that Christian view of it and what a covenant means. And so many people in my generation are just like, nah, we can just live together. We don't need to make it legal. It's pointless. There's no benefits of it. So we're not going to get married, but we're going to be committed to each other. So that's why I think in my generation, I guess it sounds like, yeah, there is an aversion to it in my generation a little bit.
Yeah. And I agree with Brother Austin for sure too, with that being said, because like I say, honestly, the fact that there's two factors here. I look at it as, if you're a Christian and you can believe in the values of Christianity, of course we ascribe to the fact that we should be married, covenant, we see the benefits, we know all of that great stuff. So we definitely push for that, and we know that's the right way to go. But on the other hand, I always have to be honest and look at it on this side. If I was not a Christian or in faith, honestly, why get married? Because I say you can look at all the reasons. We know the stats. Half the marriages don't succeed. I think, correct me wrong if I'm legally in Michigan, I think we are what we call no fault state, that, you can just pretty much lose a whole lot as far as economically and your finances and so forth. You get half, things like that. So if you're not really a Christian or anything, you believe in the tenets of Christian faith in God, why get married? Hey, the old song, as Johnny Taylor says, cheaper to keep her. Hey, all those types of things. I'm not going to get in this marriage. It don't work out. You take all my money, you take all this and all that. So yeah, as far as an aversion to it, no. I mean, I think there might be, and you talk to most brothers nowadays or sisters nowadays. Hey, I don't need a man. I don't need a woman. It's so many things. But I think marriage is honorable. I think it's the right thing to do. But like I say, before I came into Christ, I shacked up, and looking back, if I was unsaved now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not going to inherit eternal life anyway. So I'm going to eat, drink, and be married. I'm just going to be honest with you. That's how I'm going to roll as an unsaved person.
It's cheaper to keep her. It's cheaper to keep her. Okay, I'm sorry. Raised on the blues. My apologies. No, and I would definitely agree with those statements when you think about from a Christian perspective. For sure, if that is not your mindset, which many people's mindset is not, then I would say yes, there's an aversion to it. Sometimes even in Christendom, there's an aversion to it. I have a really good male friend, great guy, was divorced, had just a nasty divorce, has been divorced now about 15 years, and he wants a love interest, but he doesn't want to get married, And I was like, and I challenged him. I said, I think you're probably missing out on something amazing because of this one experience. And the experience was a bad one. So I'm not minimizing his experience, because, I'm like, You know,
when you say love interest, do you mean going in platonic, or because we know what God says about that. See, so
listen, I'm just telling you what the brother said. He said
Okay.
love interest.
Okay, I got
Okay. He said
All right.
love interest, and so he knows that, and he doesn't want to date a woman that's not a Christian, and most Christian women want to get married, no matter how old they are. You don't want to have a 20-year-long boyfriend, you know.
Sounds like he's making an excuse for himself to just kind of just be a free agent. So, yeah. Oh, the
Yep.
fine. She over there pondering.
Oh boy, I've just been listening to the good word, it sounds good, boy. I guess my angle or my thought would be that I think men haven't looked at the value in it in a true relationship, looking at it from a Christian's perspective. And that's when you lose a lot of the weight, I feel. If you look at it just as a game, and at times we go in it, playing, especially if we haven't had that father figure that helps us understand the responsibilities and everything that's tied in with it. We tend to go in by accident. We're just trying things out. So we really don't know how to really apply ourselves. So we just go in there on the blind, and we're trying this. If this doesn't work, we'll flip it over and try that. And we'll continue to try different methods. And then at the end of the day, this ain't working. You're not good. We're not good for each other. So we just dissipate. So I think it's got more variables than I think we could talk about tonight. I think everybody can, expand their thoughts even further out, because even with the nowadays situation, I want to look at the economic piece too, where I feel women now are the breadwinners, right? So the men are taking the back seat because women are making the most money in most households. So therefore, that tends to make a man feel uncomfortable about having the title as a man. I'm supposed to be
That's his fault.
I'm supposed to be the protector. I'm supposed to be the provider. And now I'm not meeting that obligation. I see a whole lot of head shaking, so I'm going to close out here real soon and let you
No,
guys.
you good. You good.
But,
I just said that's his fault though.
But where I'm going with this is, it makes a man lose that dignity of being called a man. If you can't fulfill the shoes, and I can't walk in my father's shoes. I saw uncles, being married and being able to handle things. And now it's upon me to do these, to carry on the same value system. And I can't really manage it for whatever reason. I may have been incarcerated, but I'm out now. Who's teaching me how to take on my second chance? How can I be a provider?
Right.
Who would want me? Another thing, who wants someone that's kind of like spent a lot of time in? Someone that's successful, we got to be real with it. We're not looking for someone we're going to have to drag, right? We're looking for someone that can carry their own. And if because that's what makes the punch. You got to have the ingredients there. And that's just my feeling. And I can ramble on, but I'm going to conclude right there and let others just jump in.
We ain't heard from you, Don. How you think?
A lot has been said, man. A lot has been said. So the reality is that
True that.
yeah. So the stats that we looked at are not Christian stats. So we can't necessarily look at those stats through a Christian lens, even though we try to bring a Christian perspective, right? So based on those stats, yes, there is an aversion towards marriage because of everything that everybody basically has already shared, right? And very profoundly what Elder Fent just said a second ago, as far as the dynamics of, because my wife and I, when we were talking about this particular topic, we happen to be listening to Earthquake. He's a comedian. He has his own like show on satellite radio. and they were actually talking about roles in relationships. And there is, going back and even looking at some of our older episodes where we talked about men and roles and all the rest of those things play a factor, as Elder Fenton was just sharing, plays a factor in that aversion. Because, you know, as he said, if I'm not a contributor, I'm not a breadwinner, she's making more money than me, there's those internal factors that men struggle with inside of those dynamics that makes the relationship itself tumultuous. And they internally battle with that and even step out on the woman that they're with, not because she wasn't worthy, it was because he wasn't worthy. He needed to step down in order to feel as though he was king. So there are a lot of nuances and dynamics in there, but to the short answer to the question again is that, yeah, I think there's in the world, there's an aversion towards marriage, as far as committed relationships. And I think it's, once again, based on everything everybody was sharing here earlier.
Okay, I like this. Y'all hit a lot on the head. I ain't even got to say nothing. But we want to round back to some stats, because numbers show, once again, only 15% of Black men are married out of their race. Why does this seem to garner too much attention from Black women?
Okay.
You said it doesn't garner?
Because you always hear it does.
Okay.
You always, it's like, why he got to go and, get a snow bunny, this, that. I mean, so it's like, but you have to, I'm going to let y'all talk on this and I give my take. But what y'all think?
My lens of this question is coming from my college years. And I have friends that are married to white women. And I think a part of why sometimes Black women are upset with it, and I've seen it play out, is the infatuation with as sort of like, a white woman is superior. And I'm not saying that every Black guy is this way by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that has a little bit to do with it. I remember, for example, I was at a party in college, and the guy, he was a star running back, I won't say his name, but we were at a party. And so the first party we started out was a Black party, right? And, he's in the party, I'm such and such, I had these touchdowns last week, this. And the Black girls were like, okay, cool, nice to meet you. Like, they weren't pressed by it, right? So we went to another spot, mostly white women there, and they're all over him. Like, oh, I saw your game against, such and such, and you had, and I mean, literally got the naming off his stats. You had this many rushing yards, this many touchdowns. And so he just saw the kind of praise that he was able to get from white women. And he was like, yo, like beeline straight for there. So I think that's a huge part as to why I guess sometimes Black men prefer that, because like the praise and adoration of like this prize of a Black man, if you will. If Black women, I'm like, all right, I mean, if that's what you want, go right ahead. But it's just it becomes the preference sometimes. And I think that's what has Black women upset about it. Because it's almost done in a way to make Black women feel inferior to white women.
Okay. I've heard that before, so you land something with that one. Okay?
Yeah. I would think, even in addition to what Austin was saying, typically the women that, if they are of another race, they aren't necessarily scholars. they aren't. They're more showpieces. They're more sidearms. They're more eye candy. They're they aren't necessarily astute in any particular craft. And as African American men aspire to move up the ladder in academia and in their careers, whether they be athletes or whether they be working professionals, those men are now taken off the market from African American women being able to partner with those men and become even power couples, as Black men, as Black women. And so I think offlining these men, because that percentage, even though it's a small percentage, it's a powerful percentage, because that percentage, if you look at it, take 15% of that and look at what the economics is of that 15%, that's huge in retrospect to the our overall power dynamic as far as our wealth. And so 15% is huge in the sense of what kind of caliber of man is that being offline to that woman versus the average man that you just said came out of incarceration who now has to struggle to build wealth. And he has a strong Black woman, but now he's living off of that Black woman. You see what I'm saying? The dynamics, that 15% is a big chunk. It's not a small piece.
Okay.
Well, I can
I guess
understand.
so.
I can understand a Black female's perspective from that too. Like I say, hey, you know, if like you guys were saying, if there's already a shortage of Black men and good Black men in particular, and then they go outside of their race, and then as you say, the white women, the Caucasian women are getting them, or whoever may be getting them, you know, I would probably feel some type of way too if I was trying to get a woman and, you know, there was none available because all these are getting, you know, the good ones and so forth. So yeah, I don't think it's right. I'm not saying it's right, but just, you know, human nature is, you know, like if there's nothing good for you, you go to the grocery store and all the good items are taken, you know, and they left you to, you know, secondhand shop pretty much, you know what I'm saying? You want the good stuff too. But yeah, you know, so the question says about the white women, not the white women, why would the Black women feel a certain way? But yeah, I can understand the feelings. You know, I'm not going to say it's right, but I understand it. And I'm waiting. We're definitely waiting.
She's chomping at the bit right now.
Yeah, you might as well go and knock it out.
So a few things come to mind. First, I think it's important to note that for many years, the Black woman has supported the Black man immeasurably on multiple fronts, financially, even with the man as the sole breadwinner. So I'll give you an example of my grandparents. My family in the South on my father's side was one of the fortunate families to acquire land after slavery, okay? And they planted peanuts, cotton, raised sheep. And they sharecropped to other African Americans. So on their level, they were able to obtain a modicum of wealth, all right? Farming got slowed down because we went through an industrial revolution. My grandparents moved from the farm to a big city, Birmingham. My grandfather went to a factory to go to work because it was more lucrative. He could feed his family easier. At the same time, he still wasn't making enough money to pay the household expenses, buy clothing, and feed everyone every day. It just wasn't enough. So my grandmother washed clothes, cleaned houses, did hair. And when she would clean houses, she would take home leftover food. And even though her financial contribution was maybe only 20%, what that 20% did was huge based on the fact that now everybody could eat, including my grandfather, right? Including the 9 children they had. She was able to buy clothing and make clothing for 11 people, all right? So while he could, you know, wear the crown as the breadwinner, you were only winning the bread for the literal house itself, right? Without their partnership, they would still have experienced a great deal of failure. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing, when you're talking about, to Austin's point, about the college situation, I would say that it isn't that those African-American women didn't notice his stats or weren't proud of him for his stats or all of that. They were looking for that and more from him. Like, man, that is really great. I'm so proud of you that you're really accomplishing this, athlete. But who are you? Right? Who are you? And there's also the fear that, you know, because you're this star athlete, if I like you as a Black woman, I don't want to be seen as a groupie, right? So I'm gonna fall back and be like, man, that's great, you know, da 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 da, and downplay my response as opposed to be like, oh my God, you know, I love you, because then now this is just my opinion. I don't have any stats to back it up. If I, as a Black woman,